Good afternoon. My name is Claire Miller, President of the Friends Advisory Council, and on behalf of the Friends of the Johns Hopkins University Libraries, welcome to the first Lunch with the Libraries of the 2025 academic year. This ongoing speaker series spotlights the unique collections, pioneering initiatives, and outstanding staff of the Sheridan Libraries. Formed in 1931, the Friends are one of the oldest university library support groups in the United States. We provide financial support, advocacy, and organize events like this one for members of the campus and the wider community. I encourage you to join us if you're not already a friend to help ensure that the libraries remain one of the university's strongest assets, the heart of intellectual life at Hopkins. Today's conversation focuses on Public Humanities Fellows Program at the Winston Tabb Special Collections Research Center. We'll hear about the work of one of its inaugural fellows, Nicoletta Darita de la Brown, and her exhibition titled Belonging, Unveiling the Imprint of Black Women Hidden in Plain Sight. Joining her are Special Collections Africana archivist Tonika Berkley and Tabb Center Director Joseph Plaster. Thank you, Joseph, Tonika, and Nicoletta, for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Joseph Plaster, Director of the Winston Tabb Special Collections Research Center, which is part of the Sheridan Libraries Special Collections at Johns Hopkins University. Named in honor of Winston Tabb, the Tabb Center promotes innovative research and interdisciplinary collaboration centered around the Sheridan Libraries' rare books, manuscripts, and archives. We sponsor mentored research and student-initiated learning both inside and outside the classroom. We support community-engaged scholarship by collaborating with publics within and beyond the academy, and we offer fellowship programs that promote research with our rare books, manuscripts, and archives. Today's event is devoted to one of our inaugural Public Humanities Fellows, Nicoletta Darita de la Brown. So this fellowship program, which we launched 2 years ago, supports non-institutionally affiliated organizers, artists, cultural workers, and public historians who creatively interpret our special collections materials and enable public audiences to experience them in new and exciting ways. Before introducing Nicoletta, as well as Tonika, I want to recognize a few people. Paul Espinoza, the curator of the George Peabody Library, who's worked with us to stage Nicoletta's installations and performances. Margaret Burry, Associate Director for Special Collections, who supported the fellowship program from the very beginning. And Sam Besson, who's the Levy Family Curator of Sheet Music and Popular Culture, who worked with Nicoletta before this fellowship was even launched and has been working closely with her this year. Without Sam, this work would really not be possible. So I want to introduce today's stars. That's Tonika Berkley, who is the archivist for Africana collections at the Sheridan Libraries, who's a historical researcher, museum educator, and curator. She's worked for various museums in Baltimore, DC, and Philadelphia, including the Walters Art Museum, the Baltimore Museum of Industry, and she's also been leading the processing of 2 Africana-centered collections, the Ethel Ennis, Earl Arnett personal papers, and the Billie Holiday collections. She's co-curated 2 exhibitions for Sheridan Libraries. One is titled Community Archives, Preserving Black Baltimore's History. Another is Black Foodways, a Culinary Diaspora. And she's currently co-curating a photography exhibition for the UB Blake National Jazz and Cultural Center, which is titled Bearing Witness, Photographing Black Families in Baltimore. Nicoletta Darita de la Brown is an award-winning interdisciplinary artist based in Baltimore. Her performances have been staged at the Phillips Collection, the Smithsonian, the Walters Art Museum, And her video installations have been presented at the Tribeca Film Festival, the Baltimore Museum of Art, and the Cardinal Gallery. As a Public Humanities Fellow, she's been researching with special collections materials focused on Black women and interpreting these collections through video artwork, self-portrait photography, collaborations with high school students, and site-specific performance art. I'll also add that as of this academic year, she is a member of the Tabb Center Advisory Board. And aside from these accomplishments, Nicoletta is just a vibrant being who has brought so much incredible energy to the libraries. I think you'll experience that today. And it's been an incredible honor and a joy to work with her. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
You're good.
I'm happy to be here with you.
Yes, I'm
This
very.
place is special.
Yes, it is. We are here in the Peabody Library, one of the most beautiful libraries, I feel like.
On the planet.
Yes, definitely. And you spent a lot of time here last year,
I
didn't
did.
you?
Yeah.
What were you working on while you were here?
So while I was here, in addition to like spending time with ephemera, materials, photographs, objects, papers, and people, I also had the honor of activating the space through performance and installation. So that's really magical because as an artist, to hold space in a space that's so public, but it's also so special. This is a cathedral of books.
Yes.
So in many ways,
yes.
it was a space to honor both the space itself, but all of the beings that exist in the archives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about your fellowship.
Sure.
Your fellowship is, the title is Belonging, Unveiling the Imprint of Black Women Hidden in Plain Sight. So what inspired the title of not only the installation, but also your fellowship?
In many ways, you inspired the title, to be totally honest. When I was introduced to the Real Postcard Collection, I realized that I felt so connected to beings that I didn't know specifically, but because they look like me, I wanted to know more about them. And because they live in a box or boxes, to keep them safe and housed, they're hidden.
Yes.
And you have to take them out and spend time with them. So I think that was something that I was like, oh, wait a minute. And you explained more about the history of them. And then when you introduced me to Ethel Ennis, and I was like, ooh.
Yes. Yes.
And there was so much about her that I didn't know. And then when you introduced me to the Billie Holiday collection, there's so much we don't see. And so I thought, as a Black woman, how much of us is hidden, how much of us is just visible but not seen.
Right.
And so you helped me to get access to these amazing women, and I just wanted to make sure they were seen and honored in the Cathedral of Books.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was so important because I feel like, as you were saying, oftentimes.
Are you telling as well?
Sometimes Black people in collections aren't really described as thoroughly, or we don't really know or have a lot of history on them. And one of the things that really struck me, we can start to kind of pull a few of these items. This is one of the postcards from the African American Real Photo Postcard Collection. And, you know, there isn't a lot of description. We don't really know where these people come from or what their lives were like. We can only kind of gauge and speculate on what their lives were like. And the thing that I really appreciated about the work that you did is you really creatively took on putting yourself in the place of these individuals, you know, in these postcards.
Yeah, I'm so glad you pulled this one specifically. I mean, the reality was that when I first had access, the first access I had was through the digitized collection, because you said, okay, here's these have been digitized so I
Yes.
can see them from my studio, from my computer, and there's an image. But like you said, the descriptions don't list names.
Right.
And it may be a descriptor that's like black woman on stoop with baby, or with her children, or things like that.
Right.
And often I feel like I'm described that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like descriptors and not who I am.
Right.
So I think sitting with them, and this one specifically, because to me, I don't know, but it's a mother with her children.
Yeah.
And I'm a mother.
Yes.
And this resonates with me, and even though I don't know her name or her story, I can spend time with her. And then touching them is really significant too, because you realize the age of these and the fact that they are, even this one, I mean, you can see that it's starting to softly
fade up on the sides.
So
and,
yeah, this was significant, especially when I got to hold them. And even the fact that a lot of times when I think about archives, you think you can't touch anything, or I can't really get close to it. And you made space for me to be able to spend time with them and actually touch the ephemera,
Yes.
and then figure out ways that I can have others touch it, because there's layers to that.
I'm glad that you were able to have that experience. I feel like a lot of people, when they come to visit archives, you know, they kind of have this perception that there's a barrier. You know, there's certain things, like you said, certain things that you can touch, certain things that you can't touch. But I think it's important to, you know, kind of blur that wall a little bit, because there are items that you can, you know, directly engage with and interact with. And what I was so inspired by was the way in which you engaged with these pieces through your creations, not just your installation that was here, but also your dress, which I loved. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Your process for creating them?
Yeah, I think that when you let me know that it was okay for me to touch them, I felt inspired of like, how can I give this experience to others who are potentially just floating into the library and then floating right back out.
Right.
And some of them are tiny humans, like itty bitty babies, and some of them are grandmothers who are on vacation or on trips. And so for me, I was thinking about, well, how can I take the image and then imprint it on something else? So I thought of fibers.
Yes.
I'm a non-traditional researcher, so I'm thinking as an artist, how can I take the materiality and make it something that someone else with tactility can touch?
Right.
So I took them and put them on organza and on chiffon. So I took images of us and put us on luxurious fabrics that we would wear to a quinceañera or a wedding or a coming out, and thinking about that. And then I said, I shall adorn myself, because most of these images are in your Sunday best. Right? Like,
yes.
like, hi.
There's a few of these.
Yeah, like that little baby is, you know, in a dress that to me looks like a christening dress or something, you know, very important. Lots of lace.
Yes.
And the woman holding that baby is just, listen, hi.
Yes, that is a very fancy dress.
Gorgeous, fancy dress.
Yes.
And the baby's wearing shoes. And the baby doesn't need shoes, but. So I think about adornment, like as we dress ourselves and we experience life showing who we are, I wanted to embody them by putting them onto the form, onto the dress.
Yeah.
And then other people can touch it.
Right.
Because you can touch that.
Right. You might not be able to
You
touch
may-
this,
Yeah.
you know, but you can touch,
that.
the dress, right?
And you can have a moment with
Yeah.
them.
And it was amazing to see them all together kind of collectively in that space. It's one thing when you're looking at them individually, but you know, you had them arranged where you had, you know, mothers and children together, you had babies by themselves.
I did.
And it just pulling them together as a collection visually, it made them seem like a family,
Yeah.
you know?
And I feel like we are. Like we are in the present, you know? This is a living archive to me.
Yes.
Whew.
Yeah.
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 Like we are a part of it as well. Because I could be related to anybody in this. I have no idea.
Exactly.
And I had moments where people would come in, just like I said, floating into the library, not knowing they were walking into an installation or a
Right.
performance,
Right.
and seeing an image and one woman said, that looks like my mother. Wow. And she sat there holding on the fabric this image that to her looked just like her mother.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
I was
so
like,
special.
that's special.
Yeah.
And another student of Joseph's, so that beautiful class came and did a class visit, and they were reminded of, there was an image of like what looked like siblings, and like a sister and a brother. Yeah. And she said, I have a photo at home that looks just like that, but it's me and my brother. Wow. And she brought it back.
Wow.
She came back another day.
Yeah, yeah.
She brought a partner.
Yes.
And the image. Yeah. And like put the image of her family next to the image in the dress.
That's
and I
amazing.
was like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's why.
And I love how you personalize that as well, because we have an image of Billie Holiday.
Ooh.
When she was 4, and she's got the beautiful gardenia in her hair.
Listen,
which
she started with it.
She started with it, right? And then you also had a photo of yourself.
With a bow.
With a bow.
Because I love a bow. Clearly I love a bow. At the same age.
Yes. And we have one of Ethel as well as a young child.
I know. And she also has an adornment.
Yes, she has a little.
Because we don't play
bow
games.
in her hair. Yes.
When it's fancy time, it's fancy time.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I really was moved by these images of Billie and Ethel, because to me it was like before the world told us who we were supposed to be, and it was just about play.
Yes.
So one thing I did for myself is place all of us together in the archive. I brought the photo of myself into the archive to play with Billie and Ethel.
Yes.
So we're all little girls playing before we give to everyone else.
Right.
And that was like a special thing to have access to, because you don't always see, like I've never seen a young photo of Billie Holiday.
Yeah, very few people had, kind of before that time. So, but that's just a beautiful offering and a way of personalizing, the artifacts that we had in special collections within your own story. Yeah. And so you can kind of see your own similar life trajectory, in their lives as well.
Yeah. They're really special.
Yeah.
Just even having time to sit with such a special collection. That's why this fellowship means so much, because it's about time.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, I'm just going to spend time and allow whatever comes up to come up.
Right.
And then respond to it, and then share it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and when we first, brought you into the fellowship, Joseph and, myself, and, I started working with you as archival support, I didn't know kind of where you would take things. But, I was like, I'm just going to be pleasantly surprised. So whatever, you come up with, I'm sure is going to be fabulous. And you far exceeded what I even thought was possible with all of these collections, because you really, I saw, your work as not only a performance artist, but also as a healer and as a mother. I really saw that within your work and the offering that you made to the public when they came here. You really put forth a spirit of care, not only for objects, but for people. Yeah. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about that? Like how your ethics of care factors into, your research or your artistic practice?
I believe in leaving spaces better than you found them, and that includes the beings. Yes. And everybody that comes into a space, I think, should feel welcome. Yeah. So this is a cathedral. This is a house for books. Yeah. And I thought about the people, the beings that live in the archive, and how are we caring for them? And so in my studio, this idea of like a field hospital came up. Yes. Of like, if you need care, you do triage in real time. Right. It's like, we don't have time to figure out where to go. It's like, we're gonna do it here. So I created this soft hospital space that was part like cathedral, part respite, part, hospital, but also a place to honor them as altar.
Yes. Yeah.
And everyone that comes was invited. It's like, it's not just for them or for me, it's for you.
Yeah.
And so there was people who would come, and I didn't even speak the same language as them, and they would just cry, and I was like, okay, all right.
Wow.
And we just would hold space.
Yeah.
And I'd find them a chair, and he would sit.
Yeah.
There was a moment where a woman sang and filled this space with vocals.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's magical.
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
And then it reminded me of like, how am I caring for myself? And that we'll talk about soon, I'm sure, because that's how I shifted into year 2 of my fellowship.
Yeah.
But I always begin, because I'm a mother and an educator and a healer, that how can I care for others? In real time, in public space, unapologetically, intentionally, and vulnerably, so they feel safe. That's my intention. And art is just a vehicle and a voice that I get to use to make people feel invited through the tactility of installation.
Right.
And then the performance is really me sharing the magical things I learned about healing and love in my grandmother's kitchen that I just get to share with others in spaces that are typically not spaces you rest.
Right.
Usually rest in the middle of a library.
Yeah, yeah.
Or a public park, or a museum,
Right.
or a gallery.
Yeah.
But we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we spoke about previously is the idea of nourishment. And can you speak about that as far as, because one of the things that we did look at was Billie Holiday's grocery list for a Christmas dinner that she was preparing. And, it's amazing because it's actually in her hand. But it's all things that are familiar, to all of us that we resonate with.
So when you first shared this with me, it was next to a set list.
Right.
So my brain started to imagine that she's backstage in Harlem, right? Getting ready to go on stage.
Right.
And she's like, but hold on, pause. I'm about to have a party.
Exactly.
And she's like, yeah, I need Vaseline because it's winter. And I need Christmas candy.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful list that it's intimate because it says small turkey. So it's not for
Right.
everybody.
Right.
And I'm like, who got invited to Billie Holiday's holiday party?
Can you imagine?
And all of these things we can still get. And of course, because I'm an artist, I've sourced all of them.
Yes.
And found vintage items that would have happened around the same time that she would have purchased them. So I got somebody's old Vaseline bottle. That's kind of gross, but it's not. But it was like, for me, it's like all of these things make sense because as a mother, as one who nourishes myself and others, I have these lists.
Yes. Yeah.
And seeing that in her handwriting, and I'm like, her DNA is on this paper.
It's on that paper. Yep. That's right.
And it's next to a set list of things she gifted to the world. And this was what she gifted to those she loved. Right. And I thought about nourishment. How do we nourish ourselves? How do we nourish others? How do I nourish myself? And I started to look at the lists and the groceries and the recipes that were the things that nourished me.
Yeah.
And so that's a collection I'm putting together that's going to be a book. That'll be a part of my second year.
Yes.
Of the collection of things that nourish me.
Yes.
People, places, and things. Or my grandmother would say tings.
Tings.
Or the tings that nourish you. But this was one of the most special things I've ever seen. Was Billie Holiday's grocery list.
Yes. To me, that will always be the highlight of the collection.
Period.
Yeah.
And this ended up in the installation as a whisper. Like it was this large, I printed at very large scale on chiffon, so it's like you can't really read it, but you feel it
Yeah.
as a reminder that it's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. So you hinted about your second year here. I would really love for you to talk about, you know, your first year you had your offering of creating the installation, creating the dress.
Yeah.
But your second year was slightly different. Can you
Yeah.
talk about your focus and how you pivoted for the second offering?
Well, it started very vulnerably. So when during my first year, I spent time researching and then creating in studio. And I am artist in residence at Baltimore School for the Arts, which is right down the street.
Right.
So all of my students would be able to see in real time what I was researching and then how it was becoming form. And then they got to see it installed and they got to see the performance. And I performed for a month,
Okay.
every day for an hour.
Yes.
So cumulatively, that was about 33 hours, I think, when I added it all up.
Right.
And my body felt it. So even though I loved every ounce of the time, I could feel by the end all of the energy that I was holding from not only like holding space for all of these amazing beings, but the beings that came to be here. And my body needed to be horizontal. So because of my own health, I realized that it needs to be embedded into practice. I mean, I always knew that, but it's like it got real.
Right.
And I thought about the second year, yeah, I love that we are caring for each other. I also have to care for me.
Yes.
So I thought about, one, now that my students got to see that, I want them to come to the archive.
Yes.
What happens when they touch the ephemera and they start to research and think about, well, what resonates with them and
Right.
how does that inform their practice and how do you take that in the studio? So that was important to me, to have them be able to come into a space that was magical for me and just hold space for them as they play
Right.
without having the expectation of anything. Just be inspired.
Yeah.
And then thinking about how they view softness in practice. And we had conversations around what does that look like.
Right.
Many of them, this was the end of the last school year, were seniors. And so they're not only thinking about how they're wrapping up their own practices as artists
Right.
and as students in the academic realm, but what
Right.
the next chapter looks like.
Right.
So we talked about the container of softness and how to apply that. And then I also began to think about, we are living archives. So this informed me on how I want to document and kind of take care of things that are really special to me, the objects and the people.
Right.
And so that's how the second year was shaped around being inspired by recipes.
Yeah, we had some recipes from Ethel's Place.
From Ethel's Place.
Yes. So, and of course, Ethel's Place was a restaurant cabaret that she ran and operated with her husband, Earl Arnett, and was open from '84 to '88. But we have these recipe cards in our collection from the actual restaurant itself when it was in operation.
And it's really special because in this collection, not only were there recipes from Ethel's Place, and this is black bean soup, so I'm taking notes right now. I'm like, hold on, I need to make some of this. It's winter time, almost.
Yes,
it's
almost.
giving fall energy.
Yes.
But also there were her personal recipes at home. Like there were things that this was Earl's favorite thing.
Right.
That's what she made for her boo.
Right.
This is how she cared for herself and her
Yes.
children, and then this is how she cared for the world.
Yes.
So these are really special because, I mean, we all speak food.
Yes.
We all nourish ourselves
Yes.
and each other.
Yeah.
So these are really special
Right.
and inform the work and the things I created this year.
And to me, it speaks to the parallel between, some of the parallels between Ethel and Billie. You know, because even though, they were both vocalists, they were both amazing performers, they had some overlap, kind of in their lives and the way that they engaged with people,
Yeah.
and how they fed and took care of people as well. So I'm just so happy that you were able to find those connections between the collections.
I was inspired by both of them because one, when I see them, I see myself as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And my practice is performance-based.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the fact that they made different choices with how they were giving their gifts to the world,
Right.
Ethel created what felt like to me, after researching her and hearing her words and understanding the lyrics of her songs and seeing her path, that she chose to stay here
Yes.
because, and this is Baltimore,
Right.
just in case you don't know where we are, so that she could keep that container for her
Yes.
family and for herself and keep whole and stay whole.
Mhm.
And Billie went to other spaces. And I often felt when I was reading things that were in the collection about her, it was like others' views. So she had
Yes.
less of that container of protection.
Right.
And I was like,
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about for myself, how do I continue to maintain a layer of protection while still giving?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that when you would come and you would do research in the reading room, in the archives, and the Billie Holiday material, a lot of the material is, it's interesting and joyful to see, the pieces that reflect what she was like when she was a child,
Right.
or the grocery list that we were talking about earlier. But then there's also a lot of material there that's very heavy as
Yeah.
well. Can you talk a bit about your process for processing intellectually or
Yeah.
spiritually, emotionally processing the material that you would look at when you would come those days?
Well, first I'm going to thank you
You're welcome.
because it's an academic space.
Yes.
And when you're in the collection, especially in the main room where I'm able to access the materials, it's kind of a glass box, which is beautiful,
Yes. Right.
but super public.
Yes.
And it's like, there's a light,
Yes.
there's a stand, there's a this, and it's like, I'm feeling feelings right now. And I'm really in the middle of a library.
Right.
And so what you did was you said, I booked you a second room. I was like, you did what? Just for you with no windows. I wasn't on display.
Right.
So you gave me the space to be human and be real with the humans that were real.
Yes.
And when I came across stuff and I was like, ooh, Billie, did they say that about you?
Yes. Yes, they did.
They say that about you. And they
Yeah.
wrote it down.
Yeah. Right.
And they didn't ask.
Right.
It's not in her voice.
Right. Yeah.
And so I sat in the second room that you provided for me and processed after I processed.
Right.
I processed my feelings, emotions,
Yeah.
thoughts,
Yeah.
and I could just be that special.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Not an archive.
No, it doesn't happen often.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah.
And it's necessary. I think every single archive on the planet Earth needs to have that as a practice, as a process, a room to process.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Because these beautiful things are already processed,
Right.
but we are processing them and responding.
Right.
And I often didn't know what I was feeling. I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, why is that hitting me? I don't know.
Right. Right.
instead of me just trying to move on, I could, after my time, my session, just breathe somewhere else. But know I was still in a container, so I didn't have to walk into the world like that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that, I thank you for that.
You're welcome. Of course. Of course.
And it's so necessary.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because, you know, some of the material, you know, oftentimes we go in, we open up a box, there's a folder. We don't know what we're going to see when we open up that folder. And it can be very shocking. You know, it could be something violent that may have occurred or that's been described.
Yeah.
And that's why reparative description is so important, because it gives people the opportunity to prepare themselves to receive this information.
Right.
To a certain degree. There's certain things you really can't prepare yourself for.
No.
But at least it gives you a little support, a little scaffolding for that process.
Yeah. And I think that the way that you created, you and Sam and Joseph, created the softness, like the easing into it. It's like, hey, like I can read these things, but you were like, okay, so we're going to do these things now. I'm going to stand by you. We're going to talk about it. What do you need?
Right.
Are you thirsty? Let's get some water. You know what? There's green space out. There's a tree right outside.
Right.
Let's go sit by this tree. So that was a part of the research process. And the descriptions and acknowledging the things was so important as well. And talking about them, like, oh, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's check in. Let's do a check-in.
Right.
Just every single time. Sometimes I was like, guess what I found? And so I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's important.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, it's important to leave space for all of that. You know, for all of that.
Yeah.
So, what is on the horizon for you in the future, and what's happening with you now? I'm very excited to hear.
Well, in addition to putting together a collection of things that my students put together from what they were inspired by in the collection, and my own things that nourished me into a publication, I'm also still in studio, and I'm in residencies and fellowships and all the things, and doing so many things. I got to spend time in a fellowship in New Hampshire called McDowell and be in the woods and making art. And then I'm right now in a fellowship on Governor's Island in New York.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
I take a boat to my studio. That's fancy.
Very much so.
And it's all, once again, me thinking about how many more collections and archives can I touch and experience. I'm working with Afro Charities and the Afro Archives, thinking about how people access and the experience and the engagement, like how do we experience these beautiful things that exist. And I am doing tea workshops and plant medicine and one coming up with you.
Yes.
Where we're sharing the magic of plants.
Yes.
And how we nourish ourselves and each other, and hold space and thank the plants for nourishing us. Yes. So for me, like, my chapter right now is about to is just continuing this process of making and knowing that these things are super important. Finding more archives I can play and dance in, more fellowships and residencies that I can be a part of, and more people I can collaborate with and have conversation with.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, I just wish you all the luck in all of your present and future endeavors. I appreciate everything that you've done with, you know, really internalizing the collections that you were presented with. and creating a beautiful offering
Yeah.
from that, and that inspired so many people,
Yeah.
you know, who came in to see your installation and just experience time with you.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much for your
you.
offering.
And I want to thank Sam for
Yes,
introducing.
Sam Besson.
Yeah.
Yes.
For, you know, in the stacks, this space, I learned more about the possibilities of activating it because of what Sam does. And
Yes.
Sam shared with me archival materials and then introduced me to you, and you've now become my sister forever.
Yes.
And we, yeah, I have so many people to thank, and I want to make sure that Sam knows, and that you know, and that Joseph knows, and every other being that I got to have time with, how much this means, and that I deeply appreciate it with my whole being.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, again for joining us today. Nicoletta, Tonika, and I are very excited to be joining you for this Q&A. You can use the chat feature to ask your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can. And I'm going to start with a quick question for Nicoletta about your experiences in the archives, and especially about this conversation you've been having really with the past. So, you know, we know that photographs, especially, I think, mediate between the living and the dead. In this private room that Tanika was able to provide you, you were having this conversation with these beings, you call them, that are no longer living. You printed photographs on fabric and wore them and embodied them. You displayed them at altars. So I'm hoping you can say a little bit more about this conversation you were having with I really ancestors is a word that I would potentially use. What has it meant to you? How do you see that as part of your artistic practice?
Thank you for that. It definitely is a way to communicate with the ancestors. For me, it's their beings, right? They embody that the imagery is an imprint. It's like an artifact. And because I don't often know their names or their stories, what I can do is perform ritual and have ceremony and just be present and deduce, you know, information that I would want someone to ask me if they found me in a box in 50 years,
Mhm.
something that belonged to me or my grandmother, or my children. So for me, this is a way of me connecting deeper to myself through trying to understand others. And it's a way for me to honor those who came before me. I would not be here if my mother didn't come to this country and do the things she did. So I can spend times in spaces where we're collected and we are housed and we are processed, and I can untether things and take them out of boxes and then have an experience that feels very human. That's what I do, and that's why I do it. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you for answering it. Cindy has a question. She wants to know how students interacted with the exhibition, and has the show given you ideas on how to make different spaces in the libraries for similar reflection? That could be a question for Tanika and or Nicoletta. I'll briefly mention that last semester I brought students in my course, Public Humanities and Social Justice, to talk with Nicoletta and view the exhibition, and I think it was a really powerful experience for them.
So yeah, there was lots of ways that students interacted. One, Joseph was your class, and it was a beautiful moment where the students were thinking about things before they got to the space. And then they experienced the installation and performance. And then I got back into my physical body and I wasn't in performance mode. And we went more into classroom mode and we pulled out materials that were referenced and responded to in the performance and in the installation. And we talked. And we talked about why we collect and how we archive and why these archives exist and how we interact with them as individuals, but then they also talked about it from an academic standpoint because they're students. So that's on a college level. And then we also had high school students that came from the school that I am artist in residence and alumni and teach at, and I'm parent of students who go to Baltimore School for the Arts, who came down the street and also saw the performance themselves. They got to touch the installation, and then we went back into a space and could process like in a classroom space and ask questions and look at the materials that informed um, the entire experience. So that's two ways.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Mhm. Essentially, what I did for Nicoletta is we have one main classroom space in libraries, there's special collections. Um, and that was a space that I reserved for her so that she could have time to reflect and decompress after she had her direct interactions with archival materials in the reading room. And I think that's another way that we can kind of think of classroom spaces, not only just ways of, educating our students who we're working with, but also as spaces of reflection as well. And so creating those spaces of reflection within our classroom spaces, whether it be you know, a petitioned space, that's a quiet space within a classroom in and of itself, where, you can leave space for journaling, you can leave space for people just sitting with whatever just kind of came up for them um, while they were doing their research. So I think, in ways you have to be creative, but um, I think it's possible to be able to create those reflection spaces.
Corey has a question for both Nicoletta and Tanika. Um, how would you how did you think about the politics of creating the altar specifically in the Peabody Library, and what in what way do you think that that might have transformed the space? How do you think that you may have left the space better than how you found it?
Um, in terms of, I mean, I think that being a Black woman is a political act in this country at this point. So when I enter any space, I'm thinking about the politics of it. And therefore, I have to make sure that I'm doing things in spaces that maybe I wasn't always invited, I wasn't always included, I wasn't supposed to be, and thinking about the history of it, but then also thinking about what I'm repairing while being there. So the reality was that there's a lot of things, there's layers to this that's happening. It's like doing things that had never been done, that had never been done. And please quote me, please correct me if I'm wrong, if it's been done before. As far as I know, that hasn't been done in that space, occupied, created, and it's for the public. There were people who came in that space to see it who had never been in the space because they told me they did not feel invited. So the reality is that as soon as you start to open up spaces that were not designed for certain things, you start to invite different conversations. And that is also a political act. And so repairing is often for me thinking about what was done that needs to be looked at and excavated, and let's look at the wound and let's tend to it. And also think about how we're making it safer for others, not just me as a Black woman. Everybody should be invited to the table and be able to dance in the library, just like me.
Tanika, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that one of the testaments to Nicoletta really creating that space for other folks and I wasn't there for the whole month every day, but I was there most weeks. I was there several times for her performances. And the amount of people that came up to her that I watched that were just able to just really share, openly connections that they had with, you know, obviously the notable people, Billie Holiday, Ethel Ennis, um, but then even just connecting with the images, the individuals that they saw in the African American photo postcard collection, and share and make those connections with Nicoletta. Um, there was actually a woman who wrote a piece. She wrote a poem with prose inspired by her visit with Nicoletta. So that to me was really powerful, being able to witness that and being able to witness that there were people that were touched in a way that once they left the installation, um, it definitely made their lives better um, and improved their engagement with the library and being able to feel like the library was a safe space that they could be themselves in.
So Meg highlighted something that you just said, that we're all living archives, which she feels like it's such a powerful, motivating acknowledgement of our purpose, our creative potential, and our responsibility to authentically flourish. Tanika or Nicoletta, how has this fellowship, this installation had an impact on the way you view library archives?
Well, first I wanted to say thank you, Meg, for pointing that out, for giving it back as a gift. Um, I now see archives as spaces to heal. I see them as spaces to do non-traditional research. I see them as spaces to find yourself, and I see them as spaces to connect with community. And I did not see that before. I felt that they were academic and you put on gloves. You were like, okay, let me put on my gloves and like stand here behind the thing. And now I'm like, it's a space that I can exist as a whole being. Um, yeah, that's a beautiful question. Tanika, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Um, yeah, so I've been really blessed and really fortunate that I've been able to work with different artists who have engaged archives over the past few years. And I think artists have a way of engaging with historical documents and history in general um, in a way that it's they're able to use their curiosity and their ingenuity as a lens to look at historical material and pull out truths and pull out perspectives that might not necessarily be apparent to a historian or to another archivist. And so Nicoletta's installations and the products that she created uh, from her fellowship really to me expanded on my previous impressions of like working with artists who use historical materials. She really spanned the gamut of the possibility of how these materials could be used in artistic practice, and the fact that she invited her students into the process as well. So now she's like really reaching into the next generation um, to use that methodology that she created to continue to engage other artists. And so by engaging this material, it makes it relevant for people. Um, People are continuing to use the material because they're getting, usefulness out of it. And it's also allowing us to question, you know, our perspectives on history and our perspectives on specifically those African Americans that are housed, their images, their histories are housed in the archives. How can we have different ways of looking at perspectives of how they've been recorded and how they've been presented in archives as well.
I'm going to ask two questions together as a little bundle. Corey made a special note of Billie Holiday's shopping list and wanted to know from both of you if there were other materials that really captured your imagination in a similar way. And then Milan mentioned the fact that Nicoletta, you chose these luxurious fabrics to make the dress. Can you say a little bit more about the specific fabrics, what they feel like, why you chose them, and what they mean to you?
Sure. So there's two things that popped up that were like immediately like things that felt human. There was a new acquisition that Sam shared with me that was from when Billie Holiday was in the hospital, and it was one of her last meals that she was served there. I was like, "Ooh," like looking at what her order was. I was like, "Okay." And then I was also looking at a diary, a journal that belonged to Ethel Ennis, and it had notes on things that she wanted her husband to do to stay healthy. And I was like, "That's cute." She loved her boo so much. She wrote it down. It was like different vitamins, different herbs. It was plant medicine. It was things that she wanted him to walk certain steps. And I think that those things have brought me back to the humanity of being a nourishing Black woman and getting to the fabrics and the fibers because we are priceless. We are luxury, period. And so when I look at silks and organzas and chiffons and these expensive tactile fabrics that feel good on the skin, I'm thinking about like taking images of beings that should feel that way, luxurious and priceless. So I always use fabrics that feel like that.
Final word, Tanika, about archival objects that have inspired you during this fellowship?
Um, I think, well, the main ones that Nicoletta um, was really interacting with. Um, there are also a few things like there was a tribute kind of booklet that was published um, around the time of her passing, and was a lot of entertainers, like Count Basie, Lena Horne, people that grew up with her that knew her, that they also interviewed in order to give statements about her. And it really, all of them were very interesting because everyone had a different experience with her. They experienced her differently. Um, some of the comments really reflected, um, the pain that she went through, but then some of them really reflected her humor or her generosity or just her talent, as a vocalist. And that was anything that kind of like reflects, people that have personal kind of recollections of her time. We also have a lot of oral history interviews that were also collected from people that knew her, those that grew up with her, those who performed in bands with her, um, that, kind of gave statements about, just their recollections of her, about her life.
Tanika,
Yeah.
you reminded me of when you brought me that book, right? And there was like a quote, and I forgot. I'm gonna go back to the library and find it, and you could probably help me.
Yes.
Someone
Yeah.
was like, "Billie Holiday is not tough," and I was like, "Oh,"
Yes. I
like
think that was Lena Horne.
yeah, it was like
Yeah.
pause, like
Mhm.
she was not tough, and that's in this book to memorialize her life. And we both sat together in that moment. I was like, "Woo, woo." Lena Horne said what? I just wanted to. You brought me back into that because that was the day I remember us sitting there. Oh, okay. Whew.
Well, on that note, we're going to sadly have to wrap up. We can't get to everyone's amazing questions, but there are going to be so many more opportunities to engage with Nicoletta, with Tanika, with the libraries. I want to thank you all so much for joining us to celebrate Nicoletta and Tanika's work over this past 2 years. I'll also mention that the Tab Center is going to be accepting our next round of applications for our next Public Humanities Fellow, and those applications are due October 15th. And if you'd like more information, you can visit tabcenter.library.jhu.edu. There will be a flurry of social media posts and posters about that. If you'd like to share or rewatch this program, it will soon be available on the Hopkins at Home website and also the JHU YouTube page. But for now, thank you again for coming and have a phenomenal afternoon.